My name is Mikey Soden. I head up content production for Turn 10 Studios. If you played anything with a race car in it in Forza, that's my team. Turns out with the racing game, there's a lot of cars. So welcome to our talk or panel. I've got a bunch of talented folks, some of whom I work with directly, some of whom I have just heard great things about, but we're here today talking about the craft of production, specifically how we drive production, development, delivery within XGS. Before I introduce these folks, I do want to dispel one thing right off the bat, which is I don't think there's a monolithic way to approach production at large, certainly not at XGS. If you look at the scope and breadth of our studios these days, it would be criminal, I think, to develop a Halo game the same way that we would develop something, say, like Sea of Thieves. With that, I will turn it over to some of these folks to say hello. Alex, you want to take it away?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Well, he sorts this out. Matt, do you want to?
Yeah, I can speak. Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Turnbull. My pronouns are he and him. I'm an executive producer in Xbox Game Studios Publishing. I've been with Xbox for about, it's been over 13 years now. I've worked on a number of titles, including Forza Motorsport, as well as a variety of things like Kinect, HoloLens, and many other titles like Recore and Crackdown. So I'm very excited to be here to talk to you all today about production.
Hello, everybody. Is my mic on? It's low. It's on, off. I think it's on now. Hello, everybody. My name is Erica. I am a senior producer at Xbox Game Studios Publishing, specifically on the cloud gaming team. I use they, them, or she, her pronouns. I'm probably the newest person to Xbox in this panel here. I've only been here since August, but I've been in the games industry for about a decade.
Hi everyone, I'm gonna just hope my mic is on. My name is Vanessa Mayarco, my pronouns are she, her. I'm a senior producer over at The Coalition. It's the home of the Gears of War franchise and an Xbox first party studio. I've been with Xbox for a little bit over a year now, but about 7 years ago I also got my start at Xbox as an intern, so it's almost like a homecoming, which has been really, really interesting. And I'm a senior story producer, so I work on everything from casting to writing to cinematics to narrative and everything in between.
All right, take two. Can you hear me? All right, hi everybody. I'm Alex Lomelico, pronouns he and him. I'm a producer on Halo Infinite. I used to be a graphics producer, moved on to Engine, now producing with Forge team. So I'm really happy to be here. I used to work at Ubisoft Montreal before. Yeah, hi everybody.
I think it'd be good to probably set a foundation here. I think a lot of times within the industry, you'll hear producer, depending on the studios you've worked with or the companies you currently work at. Producer means different things. And for me, when I think of a producer, I think on budget, on time, at quality, hopefully with a healthy team. But with this folks, Matt, you tell me, you've been here since dirt. Like, what's a producer to you?
No, I mean, you said it best earlier when you were like, there's no one true way to be a producer. There's no one job description. You end up wearing a lot of different hats. You end up doing a lot of different roles. At the end of the day, the biggest thing that makes a great producer for me is somebody who can bring clarity to a team and help a lot of different people who are working on a lot of different disciplines, creative, technical, all these different roles, and help make sure they're pulling in the right direction. They're all moving in the same place at the same speed, that they're going to get to their final destination that they're trying to get to.
Sweet.
Yeah, I think I would add into that, to me, a producer is the central hub of knowledge of any given project. And that doesn't necessarily mean that producer has everything memorized in their head, but they are usually the person who's creating the source of truth, and they're making sure that the right people are all talking to each other.
I think we're all saying something similar in that being a producer changes with the teams that you're on. For me, being a producer is someone who is able to truly support their team and learn that their team are experts and adopt their processes and pipelines in order to best suit each individual team. And that's going to be unique depending on which team that you're on. And I think another thing that we had mentioned as well is that there's a certain level of clarity that producers bring, but it's always good to remember that that clarity is not the same thing as certainty. As a producer, you don't want to say that everything is golden, everything is roses. You are there to escalate and outline what the risks are and how to best mitigate them. And I think that's what makes a producer unique.
Yeah, it seems like all producers always have to have one goal in mind, which is achieve the target that we have. But not all producers go about it the same way. I know that on the Halo Infinite team, we heavily rely on agile methodologies and Scrum, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. What that means in concrete terms means that we just need to have these rituals that allow us to communicate with our teams pretty regularly and frequently to make sure that the goals that we outline are established and that we have one vision for the next milestone or the next sprint. It's been a very, we had to go through a big change on Halo Infinite because we went from that one and done big AAA game that we launch and move on from to actually having to pivot to a live service game. And for producers who have had to go through this, they know how challenging it can be to completely rethink the way you conceptualize, produce, and release content in a staggered way. So hopefully the tools that we have at Xbox allow us to go about it in the best way that works for our team, but it doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be one holistic way for everybody.
Sweet. A couple things that are jumping out to my ears here, other than my voice and the feedback, is I hear publishing and obviously in studio folks like the three on the right here. Having spent time with the foot in each pond, so to speak, I think about the way that you would approach driving production when you were in studio, is that you have lots and lots of little moments to drive impact, and where you can start to steer something with lots of little pieces of feedback or lots of moments of impetus. Whereas with publishing, my experience with it was that to drive, first off, most of the time, and keep me honest, you're publishing folks. You're working with someone who's external, a partner who's external. The ways that you interact with them are often distant, spread out. So you get fewer places to push, hopefully to come to the same outcome. But you folks are the experts. You tell me, how would you characterize the difference in how you approach driving development between, say, publishing and us folks who sit in a cave and make games?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a really interesting sort of dichotomy that we have within Xbox. From Phil Spencer on down, we all share the same mission, right? We're trying to bring the joy and community of gaming to over 3 billion gamers on the planet. And every single person in Xbox Game Studios knows that that's the goal, that's the outcome, that's the thing we're pushing towards. But the way that we get there is different, like the different paths that we take, the different roles that we have. In publishing, our role is to help external development teams that have this incredible vision for a game, that have these awesome ideas, these incredible talent, this great technology, whatever the mix is and the blend is to make some amazing new piece of software, and help them turn that into a video game product that will hit shelves, that will come out in over 200 countries and regions around the globe, that will be able to be played by millions of gamers everywhere, that will be marketed well, that will be sold well, that will be distributed, that will be globalized. So it's really the role on the publishing side and the production side to be the conduit for that team to all of the different pieces that work within Microsoft and within Xbox to help bring their game to life and to provide them with the support and the opportunities that they need to turn their video game into a product.
Mikey, to be clear, I actually do sit in a cave and work. I work remote and I have 4 cats. But on the subject of having, sort of like maybe fewer contact and fewer buttons to push.
Yeah.
On the publishing side, we do have people that we do like regularly engage with on the external studio side. So it could be somebody like Vanessa or Alex. I personally meet with external developers at a minimum once a week. And so it's obviously not the same thing as running a daily stand-up and having those daily touch points with the teams who are directly working, quote unquote, in the trenches on the game. But you still have a lot of opportunities for influence, especially early on in the concept phases of the project.
Yeah, and the way that I like to look at it, or at least the relationship between developers and publishing on the production side, is that for me, my experience on the production side has been sort of working with teams to do what I like to call crafting lightning. And then the publishing side is more directing that lightning as it goes outward, right? So we want to create something that's special. We want to make sure that we're in our own little bottle, working with our teams. On my side of the coalition, that looks like working with our directors on the unified vision for our story, working with our leads on how we're going to bring that to life with our various resources, working on things like ramp-up plans and milestone planning and roadmap planning, and of course, then working with the other producers and our content developers on how we're going to bring these stories to life. And so when we have a good outline of what we want our deliverable to be, whether that be in a sprint or an overall milestone, we're feeding that information up to, say, someone like Erica or to, say, someone like Matt to better align how we're going to move forward with our next release and our release after that.
Thanks, Alex. So how about between, say, tech and content? Like, for example, I think building cards is a pretty straightforward waterfall process, but I imagine you mentioned Agile. Like, how is that day-to-day different, say, from what you would experience on the publishing side?
Yeah, that's a good question. On the engine team at the time, we had to meet with our partner teams on the content side pretty regularly to make sure that we stayed in touch with the vision of the game, with what they needed from the tech side, but not only from the content teams, but also our partner teams that worked at different studios, just to make sure that we have a common vision on what we want to deliver. And the Scrum process or the Agile process is very much focused on iterative work. So when you deliver something, there has to be some sort of touch point for people to review the work that you've produced, provide feedback, and then trying to address this feedback for the next touch point, and so on. So working with all these teams, I think, especially in this new environment after the pandemic and working from home, over communicating, making sure that you got some touch points, regular touch points, to make sure that everybody's speaking the same language has been paramount.
All right, so clear differences, some similarities. I think perhaps what I wasn't aware of prior to starting at Xbox was just how much shared maybe tissue or connectivity there is. So what are the things that bind us in the roles that we do when you think about driving development?
Yeah, one of the things I really like about working at Xbox, and specifically working at Xbox Game Studios, is from Phil Spencer to Matt Booty down through our different managers, our different leaders. There really is a recognition that our audience is made up of different people. There are different players for all our different games, and that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. And so our teams are given a ton of opportunity to set their own path, to set their own direction, to make sure that they're serving the audience, serving the gamers that play our games the way that they need to be served, the kind of content and the kind of development processes. But we also have these incredible opportunities to share things with each other. I have access to this incredible treasure trove of resources from the greater Microsoft system and from Xbox. But most importantly, I have access to amazing people like my fellow panelists, and I can learn and grow from seeing how they develop, how they build games, the things that they run into, their challenges.
Yeah, weren't you just talking to Mikey the other day about Shockgrid?
Yeah, so that was one of the best things about being a part of this larger Xbox family, is that we take the processes that we have over at one studio, and if we're trying to integrate something else like Shockgrid for one of our cinematic processes, we can reach out to the Turn 10 team, we can reach out to Ninja Theory and say like, hey, aren't you also doing that? Like, how can I better utilize Shockgrid in my own production in order to make sure that my team is using it as effective as possible? What do I need to learn? What are the ins and outs? And with various tools like that, right at your fingertips, being able to have those resources right at your fingertips, you feel like you're never sort of alone in the overall production family, which is really pretty cool.
It's funny when you were talking about Shockgrid. Erica, you're right. It was the first time I met Vanessa was in prep for this panel, and it was kind of like she mentioned briefly, oh, Shockgrid. I was like, I do that too. The thing that's funny is that in conversation we found out is that we actually use them in pretty disparate ways. So there's not a lot to share there, but I'm sure just in navigating how to track the complexity that we have, I am sure we're going to be chatting.
Yeah, it was really interesting. It was like, oh, almost. And I remember messaging you right after, like, hey, how are you using it? And turns out that we're using it in different ways. So that's awesome too, right? So the next time that I'm working on with a team or a project that might be utilizing Shopbit in the way that you're utilizing it, I can be like, well, I know one person that's at least has had experience doing this, and I know I can rely on someone. Even if they're in a different studio, you're just like a team's ping away, which is awesome as well. Then we're also looking to different Xbox game studios for the things that they're doing with regards to accessibility as well. Something that was really cool that we saw come out of the Forza team was the ASL and all of their cinematics. It sort of propels our team to think about accessibility in different ways and how it can become an integral part of the process. And so seeing your team do that also pushes us to want to do better as well. And so it's awesome to be able to learn from that and have those resources as well.
Yeah, I mean, Xbox is a global company, right? We have studios all around the world, and some of their, I'm constantly inspired and challenged by the amazing things that I see our partners doing, both inside Xbox, but also the external partners that I get to work with in publishing. But all the other studios do bring to bear all of these incredible practices. Another thing that kind of binds us together are a lot of shared values. There are some things that are just important to us at Xbox. Making sure that Xbox is a place where everyone can have fun, gaming for everyone, ensuring that people can play, that we are, trying to lead the way on accessibility, that we're trying hard to push in these directions. There's always more work to do, and we have, our stumbles and our fallbacks as well. But I've been really appreciative within Xbox Game Studios about the amount of both accountability from senior leadership, but also the resourcing and the attention that's being paid to senior leadership on our opportunities to go and push boundaries in those areas.
Yeah, I think being at such a large company, there's just this plethora of resources that we have access to. And working in publishing, we work with these external studios who are not necessarily under the Xbox umbrella. And they may not necessarily have these resources themselves, right? To accessibility best practices, or to, what good representation looks like in different markets. And so we're able to take these resources and share it with our partners in a way that, they don't necessarily get to have themselves. And we've even done amazing workshops with them too, partnering with people like Glad. It's been amazing.
Yeah, I feel like at Xbox, we do have shared values across studios, whether it's for diversity or accessibility, but more recently, sustainability has also been a pretty big topic in the game development space. And I had discovered over the summer that Microsoft actually invested in having an Xbox sustainability team that was responsible for lowering the carbon emissions of our game studios. Microsoft has some ambitious goals about being carbon negative by 2030. And, we try as studios to lend a hand and see how we can help reduce those emissions as well, because I'm sure, as as consoles and games become bigger and consoles become more performant, it becomes also more energy intensive. And so I feel like it's our responsibility as developers to start thinking about these concepts very early on. We have some accessibility standards that have been pre-established and that we think about when we are in concept or pre-production, for example. But sustainability is just as important, and we're right now building those standards for the future of development and trying to understand how the games industry can navigate these new challenges, like the impact we have on the climate, for example. So that has been very insightful to work with these teams and to just learn so much about what we can do and how we can tackle it.
And I would say as well, on a personal note, sort of outside of production, one of the things that I have been looking forward to and I'm really excited about now is that being a part of the Xbox Game Studios, but more so Microsoft as well, is that we do get connected to other people that I might have otherwise not met just through the ERGs, the employee resource groups that we have. Black at Xbox being one of them. Within the coalition, there's the Rainbow Coalition, our LGBTQ plus organization that we have there. Things like Women in Gaming. I'm coming from Vancouver, Canada, and it has a really small Black population actually. So being able to reach out to other ERGs across the Microsoft network is really empowering for me because it makes me feel like I'm not alone, which is really cool to see, especially within Xbox, within the industry, within tech. So it's really good to have sort of that backing and empowerment too.
Something that sorry, you can clap. It's fine.
Oh, thank you.
Something that jumped again to my ear was Matt, you said accountability, and the other one, it happens to be another A word, is accessibility. But I think the part that maybe I'm still not only surprised but inspired by is that when you think about the accountability that we have to not only our players, but that comes down as a requirement they fulfill about accessibility. It's not about thinking about, we have a good design, let's tack accessibility onto it, right? Like that has been a trend for a while. These days, the accountability looks like if it's good design is accessible, right? There isn't design and then you add something onto it. And I think that's one of the things that, Erica, you had articulated really well in the prep, but when I think about all of the resources that we have, the various causes that it's not just tacked on. It's almost like this is the expectation. It's got to be accessible. It's got to be sustainable. It's got to be inclusive. That's something that I frequently am, like I said, inspired by. All right, so we're going to be heading towards questions here in a moment. Maybe the thing that, in the spirit of GDC and sharing a bit, because we've got a range of experiences and focuses here, what is your advice you would give to an aspiring producer?
I'd say, when you start in the industry as a producer, it can be a bit intimidating. You have a lot of people relying on you for information. You're kind of the focal point of the team. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I think I'll just reiterate it again. Over-communicate. It's very important to make sure everybody is aligned. Then you make sure that if you hold a piece of information, you are the holder of these keys for your team. Everybody's so focused on their own task. They all have a lot to do. So it's your responsibility as a producer to make sure you go after your team and make sure you bother them with your information. Because so often it gets lost in translation or it falls between cracks. So as a young producer, make sure that everybody knows what you know at all times.
Yeah, on the topic of over-communicating, I like to think about communication as either a push or a pull. And so you are either pushing information out to other people, or other people are asking you and pulling it out of you. And so you want to be a pusher of communication. If people are asking you too frequently to pull that information out of you, that's probably a sign that you're not communicating enough.
I'm a very big believer in people over processes, and people define what our processes are going to be. And so for aspiring producers, well, the first thing I'd say if you are not in the industry but are trying to get into the industry is that all of your skills, most of your skills, are transferable skills. I think a lot of times we look at a job description and say, like, I haven't done that, but we don't take the time to say, but I have done this. And how does this sort of correlate to what I'm seeing in the job description or the application? And so that sort of first layer that maybe would turn people away or turn people out from applying for a job, I think take the time to look at what you have, the things that you've done in your own experience, and say, you know what, yeah, that is a transferable skill that I can bring to production. Because a lot of us already do have those skills, or have been in job experiences where we've been able to utilize those skills. And then once you're in, always make sure that you're, again, trusting your team. They're your experts. They're going to help you refine and grow your production processes in a way that best supports them. And of course, what also makes you a better producer. So I'd always make sure that you're putting them over the black and white processes that you might be coming in with. You guys are so nice. Thank you.
Honestly, I would say if I had one piece of advice to offer to aspiring producers, it would be always pack one more pair of socks than you think you're going to need. So like if you're staying for 5 days, go 6 pairs of socks. They're going to get wet. You're going to have a problem. Something's going to happen. No, but in all seriousness, I want to return to that point of clarity. Clarity is made up of two key components. There is understandable, comprehensible information that people can grasp and wrap their heads around, remember, and then truth. And truth is sometimes that we don't know. Truth is sometimes that the answer is unknown. And being able to communicate with clarity when something is known, when something's unknown, how true something is, and what are the things that people need to know at any given time is, I think, one of the most important skills a producer can have. So if you're going to be working on your skill set as a producer, if you're going to be working on how to be a better producer, the number one thing you can work on is your communication skills, your storytelling skills, your ability to share ideas in a way that people understand, and share ideas in a way that people can understand the truth of them, the sincere heart of what that information is. And the socks thing. Yeah. That's the other key thing.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. One thing I want to tack on to that is I really value when people tell me I don't know. I would take an I don't know versus a let me guess, and then it's something that they're not certain about or something that they're just trying to hope what it is. I think something that's really powerful, especially for beginning producers, aspiring producers, is I don't know, but I can try to find that information out for you. I don't know, but let me find that information out for you. And then in doing so, in sort of finding your way and finding your own path to finding out that answer, you're also learning more about what's in your role, the people that you're connecting with, the people outside your own team. And so I think going through that motion of trying to find these answers, it makes you grow as a producer as well.
I find myself agreeing with you a lot, Vanessa. All right, so we are right at time. If anyone has any questions, feel free to make your way up to the mic and drop them in. Otherwise, thanks for coming.
I'm not sure. Thank you. I really appreciate you guys doing your panel. I'll make sure I have a pair of socks. So, all right. So, in your production career, what was the hardest conflict you experienced, and what was the steps you did to handle it?
Oh, I can take this one if you want. I mean, I've over my 20 years now doing game production, I've encountered a lot of conflicts, and the number one thing that I've found is critical is to sort of de-escalate, is to find ways of helping everybody calm their emotions about a thing and start to wrap their heads around what the truth is of the situation or what the facts are, what the data is. People get really, really attached to strong ideas, to get creative ideas. People get really emotionally invested in things. And that's awesome. That's great. We want passion. We want people to be pursuing, what they believe in and what's true. Being able to do that without getting personal, setting rules of engagement for people for when they disagree and what those rules of engagement are and how to navigate through those conflicts. And then finding ways to learn how to de-escalate those situations has been really critical path as a producer for me in being successful over the years.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. So I just recently got the opportunity to be a lead producer, and I now have the feeling that my former colleagues are looking at me for answers. Do you have, either you, Mikey, have some advice how to deal with that as a lead producer? Or maybe do you have any expectations from your leads? Because you're also in a position where your teams look at you. Maybe.
Yeah, sure. So Vanessa said it about as well as I've heard it, right? I think don't be afraid to, if you don't know the answer, don't fake it. Say, I don't know, I'll get back to you, right? It's that second part that's the really important thing. But from a feeling perspective, that moment of uncertainty and like, oh, crap, I'm supposed to know the answer? I don't know. Try to manage yourself through that and get to the find the answer part.
Yeah.
The follow-up, more than anything, will start to build a sense of reliability and comfort with your team where they know, hey, if this person doesn't know, I know they're going to chase it down and get back to me. So don't forget that part. Even once you find out, over-communicate and like push the information out, like Erica said.
Yeah, if you don't know, don't guess.
So, yeah.
Find out.
I think I'm on the right path, so.
That's great.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Hi, gang. My question is, producers sit kind of at this intersection between all of these different stakeholders. How do you approach getting buy-in from those stakeholders, and then how are you balancing that just kind of day to day? And I guess, what is the difference publishing versus, in studio?
I would say from a developer standpoint, when you work with a lot of different stakeholders, having those frequent touch points, like I mentioned earlier, is very important. But I think it's also about making sure you lay it out very clearly. One of the things that we did when we launched Halo Infinite was look at the future. And so the game is done now. What are we going to do next? And what kind of features do we want to come up with? And so to get buy-in from your teams, it's as simple as just asking them, looping back with them, making sure that we understand what their challenges are and when they need help from your team. And so it might be silly and kind of obvious, but writing it down in your Jira or whatever bug management tool you're using to make sure it's actually in there in the database. We have a saying at the office where we say it doesn't exist until it's in ADO, which is the tool we're using. So make sure as a producer that you follow through and you actually break it down to the granular level that makes sense for the stage you're in. When you're just talking about concept and ideating, high level user stories might be enough, but then once you start getting into the nitty-gritty, you need to break it down into more comprehensive tasks and then start costing them and understanding how long everything's going to take. Once you have this, you can create a timeline, and the folks that have requested work from you or that depend on you can just see whether that timeline fits what their needs. It really is such a collaborative profession, which is what I really love about it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Hi. I talk to other producers, and it seems like the job varies a lot from studio to studio. And one of the things that I found myself really curious about, as a producer, you're a focal point, as you said, and like a on time, on budget, at quality. And yet, there's also a cinematics director, a narrative director, an audio director. They're also a focal point, a point of kind of accountability. How do you kind of separate those two things so you're not stepping on each other and you're working in harmony with the directors, I guess?
First word that comes to mind when I think of is partnership. Right. Ultimately, I'm not part of a team to ship a schedule. As much as I think players would really like my Gantt charts, I don't think that's going to raise the bar of like a game. So I partner with people because ultimately I'm there as a force multiplier, as a producer, to help guide them through something. So I call my vehicle art director my partner in crime. So as a producer, it's more about being a traffic controller for those disparate groups and trying to align them, but it's certainly not an independent endeavor. It should be representative of what that partnership is. That's my thought.
Yeah, I would say shared goals, honestly. Shared goals is so critical. The idea that if you have a North Star that everyone is pointing at, an agreed on pillar for the game, an agreed on user story for the experience, an agreed on audience need or player need, a problem you're trying to solve, as long as everybody is all working towards the same shared goal, and you can all point back to that shared goal, you can constantly find your way to work through influence, work through partnership, and find the places where you disagree why, but you are never disagreeing about what you're trying to do. It's just about how you get there. And arguments or disagreements or conflicts about how you get somewhere are a lot easier to resolve than arguments about where you're going.
And I would like to just add in that user research is your friend. Like, you can have an opinion, the creative director can have an opinion, but at the end of the day, N equals X number of people also have an opinion, and their opinion sells your game.
I appreciate like the variety of answers because it's a very specific question to each studio. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for a great panel. I have a question that might be mostly for Matt and Erica, but I'm certainly would love to hear what all of you think. So when you're working with external partners, what are some tools and technologies that you use to help build alignment and facilitate the production of the game? We've heard about Agile and Scrum in this panel, but I'd be curious to hear about some of the things that you all use when you're working externally.
I don't know if you want to hop in on this first, but for the most part, we try to use the same tools that the developer is already using. We try not to impose too many of our own processes onto them. If they're using Jira, great, we're using Jira. If they're using ShotGrid, you can continue using ShotGrid, that's fine. For the most part, we don't want to become an extra layer onto the already difficult process of making games. We just want to make sure that we're in at a level where we're just getting the information that we need in a way that hopefully doesn't encumber you too much.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is any tool that helps me communicate an idea more clearly or communicate feedback more clearly is valuable. Sometimes that's a bug database or entering bugs and filing issues. Sometimes that's something like a PowerPoint. So learning those communication skills, those presentation skills, being able to communicate your ideas clearly, and like Erica said, meeting your developer where they are, meeting your partner where they are with their strengths, what their area is, how they like to absorb information, and then learning how to speak their language.
Thanks.
Hey, all. So for the past 10 years, I've been asking this question to every fellow producer that I meet. What are the tips or things that you guys have learned about really maintaining quality and value when you're in the development process without being disruptive to the team or just saying no. Like I hate having to say no to someone, but it's just about keeping the quality, make sure you're keeping towards that value at the end.
Ultimately, when I think about quality, so I hear a couple of topics in there. When I think about quality, the build will tell you everything you need to know, and that sounds kind of like a monolithic. Oh, the build will tell you everything, but like if you have questions about the quality or how your game's, whether it's performant or it's crashing or it's bug centric, the build is a place. So make that the source of truth, because what will often happen, as human beings, there can be a bias towards comfort and trying to comfort a team with their tracking. And when your tracking diverges from the quality of your build, you can get into trouble. And so always use that as another source of data to sort of assess quality. It will tell you more than your bug database most of the time, in my experience.
So you're like being open about it too, and being able to acknowledge that there are
absolutely.
issues, stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah, like Matt had said, truth. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, but it's the truth. Work in reality, right?
Yeah. Just starts to be
very
delivering
rarely
that.
say no. My favorite thing to do now is say yes, and this is what it's going to cost. And then we usually go from there. I think utilizing those data points, as you're mentioning, Mikey, and just showing them the good, better, best scenarios. Like we can do X, but it will cost Y through Z all the way back up to A through F. And do we want to prioritize that within the production that we're making? And if we don't want to prioritize that, then okay, we have our answer. And if we do want to prioritize that, then okay, this is what we're giving up, and we're all agreeing that that is what it costs because that's what we value. So that's usually where I take it.
And the way to make those decisions, like I love that answer, by the way. I love everything about that. But the way to like drive those decisions, honestly, is usually about ensuring that there is a shared vision and a shared set of goals. If you are at a very high level, everyone's aligned on, again, where you're going, what your goals are for the product. Knowing whether or not something is too much, not worth it is something you can drive back to. You can recognize like, oh, this thing has to be X, Y, and Z in order to be important for our audience. And if we don't do this, it won't be X, Y, or Z. Then you have to figure out how to do that and whether it's possible and what that means for the project if you can't do it. Those goals are always just such a powerful North Star to go back to and point at and derive your features, derive your user stories, derive your dependencies, and derive your hard decisions.
Yeah, that's always the case with producers. Sometimes it's a triangle of challenges. You can be on time, on budget, or in scope. We can only sometimes pick two of them. Thank you, guys.
Or one, or none.
Ideally, two at least.
Hey, thanks so much for holding this talk. How do you evaluate a producer? How do you know if someone's ready to go between seniority levels? There's a ton of soft skills, and I think you often know that you've done a good job, but how do you prove that you've done a good job and show that you've actually had that impact that you feel that you've had?
Oh my God, that's a hard one.
That's a good one.
I've struggled with this for 7 years.
Well, yeah, because production is not just like a hard skill, right? There's so much soft skill involved. There's a lot of emotional intelligence involved. And one of the things that you have to kind of do, depending on the organization you work for, is like creating these assets that you can point to and be like, look, I did this. Look at, how many sprints I ran. Here's these burn down charts that I built. Here are some challenging conversations that I've had to have with developers. And you kind of have to learn how to advocate for yourself and tell those stories because production is such invisible work. So when things are going really smoothly on a project, it might even look like you're not doing anything.
Yeah,
right?
That's definitely a fear.
So you want to start establishing relationships with other producers, with people who are other members of the organization that you work for, so that you can have regular conversations with them and be like, oh, this is what I was doing with my team this week, blah, 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 and start establishing these stories because you want to be able to talk about these experiences that you handled and managed because, again, production is a lot of times very invisible. So, and it's hard to advocate for yourself. I know for myself, my background is I come from a Japanese background, and we do not brag about any of the work that we do.
Yeah, as a fellow Asian,
stay humble. Yeah,
real hard.
And it's a challenge to overcome that, and it's something that you have to just practice, and get used to talking about yourself.
Cool. Thank you so much.
There's probably more.
Oh, yeah,
I
I
just
would
wanted
love to
to
know. This is a hard question.
because we were talking about agile a little bit earlier, and one of the great unsung heroes is sprint retrospectives. People aren't huge fans of that usually, but it's a good time investment because it's a way to look back on your processes. And as a producer, I feel like you've done a good job if people have only positive feedback, but that will never happen. People will always have something to say, and it's great because that way you get to help your team in meaningful ways that actually bother them every sprint. The only advice that I would give is to actually track the feedback that they've given you and explain regularly what you've done about it so that you don't repeat past mistakes and really learn and build from it. So yeah, sprint retrospectives, do them, they're great.
Cool. Thanks again.
Hello, thank you for doing this talk. And this is kind of piggybacking off of the previous question, but in your guys' experience, have you ever seen an instance where communication with the team has been like so good it's going to like drastically change your like day-to-day workflow?
I've had the opposite for sure, where I've had to change my workflow dramatically to try to resolve communication challenges or communication issues. I would say that you are always going to be meeting the team where they are. You're always going to be recognizing the level of communication necessary in order to communicate your ideas, in order to communicate clarity, in order to ensure that the creative vision is being adhered to and that you're getting the right return on things and that you're tracking velocity. So you're constantly adjusting your workflow. You're constantly adjusting how many stand-ups you need, how many meetings you need, what those meetings are about, how long they are, whether or not they're in person or hybrid or fully remote. And then there's pandemics, and that changes all your workflows. Like it is always, the role of a producer is often about assessing people's work and assessing how things are going and understanding the results and the outcomes and how that stuff is happening. You do that with your own work all the time. You have to be assessing your work, assessing the communication workflows, assessing how people are engaging with the systems that you built. If nobody opens a document that you made for everybody to go read to see something over the course of a month, like either A, that's not a great document, or B, you're not doing enough to push it to the right places. And so I would say I'm always changing my workflow. I'm always adjusting and tuning and tweaking by assessing how things are going.
Yeah, I think I would add, I was thinking about this. I've been on teams where, actually my very first opportunity in production, I was in test, and I got this sort of battlefield opportunity to support a very, very senior, very, very experienced team. I had a very kind design director who was good about telling me when I was just putting things on top of them that they didn't need. So in other words, this is there were parts of the team that were very well functioning, and it was like, hey, we don't need all of that right now, and he would kindly tell me that. And so I think some of it is being aware of like what the team needs and adjusting, like Matt was saying, your approach, because they may not need a lot of the structure and apparatus that you can have, but there's tremendous other value that you can provide.
All right, it's very insightful. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Thanks for the talk. And so I'm a current student. I had a question about a little background. As a student entering into production, I have worked on several school projects wherein there were two scenarios. First, where me and my team, we are building a new game from the scratch. All of us are new and, with high passion. Second scenario, where I, as a producer, was new to the team, which the game, they were already building a game, and, I'm a new producer there. So I found a lot of struggle, into settling well in the second scenario. So are there any tips you would like to, tell me about how to settle well in a new team, where they are already working on a game, So
I think something that Matt said really resonated with me is that you have to meet the team where they are. And so when I join a new team, or when I did join a new team over at the coalition, the team that was already established, and I was the new person, I should say, is that I just outright asked them, how can I help you? Like, what is it that you need from me? What is that you're hoping for in a producer, right? And they're going to come with a lot of things, some things that are within the realm of production, some things that might not be in the realm of production, but you can help connect the dots. And so we talked a lot about guesswork and how we don't want to do guesswork, especially within production, because our role isn't to make sure that everything looks like rainbows and butterflies. It's to present the truth. It's to communicate, and it's to elevate and escalate and de-escalate risk as they come up. And so when you're being approached in that situation where you're like, I am the new kid in town, the best thing you can do is meet people. And how do you meet people? Is asking them what they do, who they are, and how you can best help them.
And roll up your sleeves. Like, find a way to contribute, find a way to add value to other people's work, find a way to help force multiply their work, make it so that they can do more with less. The first thing that I do when I come into a team is try to assess what are the areas where there are problems or areas where there are challenges that I can just help with previous experience, previous knowledge, missing tools, missing components, missing assets, things that I can provide that will just help everybody out. And I found that helping people with their work so that it's easier, not harder, builds a lot of trust and builds a lot of shared outcomes, shared desire to work with you and to meet you where you are. I had an old producer I worked with many, many years ago. He said he liked to try to do 10 things for a member of his team where they contributed to their work or helped them before asking them for one thing to help with something he needed. Now, I think that ratio is off. I don't ascribe to that ratio. But the idea I really enjoyed, which was the idea that if you're providing value to a bunch of people on this team and you're constantly giving back and helping them with whatever they need, then when it comes time for them to come help you, then they're going to be predisposed to want to work with you and want to partner with you on what it is you need in order to help the whole project succeed.
Sometimes the team is already used to the processes built by the previous producer, and you are the new one bringing new processes in, and it's a kind of struggle to find that good balance to create this new dynamic. So I guess it's about experiencing and going through and just trying new things, right? So but that helps. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Hi everyone. Thank you all for coming. Very excited. I grew up playing Gears of War and Halo, so I literally scream. I will talk to you after. But I just started in the games industry this past May. I used to be a professional pastry chef, and I got very lucky to get thrown into games. It was just a strange dream job I didn't know I would be really good at. But something that I've been thinking about lately is I'm really good at it. I like production. But I don't know where my career will go. So I think associate producer, you're kind of deep in the trenches, what you're saying, but how does your job change as a producer once you become a lead producer or an executive producer? What does that look like?
Executive producer.
I don't want to go first on this one. I want someone on the panel to talk about where they are, and I can kind of talk a little bit about career path. But the long story short, I'll just cut to the end and then dive in with the real legitimate data. You can go anywhere with production skills. Production skills are universal. Communication skills, storytelling skills, the ability to organize people, the ability to lead them to places, and to be a servant leader and help provide things. You can go lead countries. You can go build skyscrapers. You can do anything with this skill set. The better you get at it and the broader you build it. So anyway, please dive in with more actual practical data.
Well, I got my start. Actually, I first got my start on the Xbox side with marketing. So I was marketing for Xbox and then doing all of the sort of digital marketing campaigns, and then got into development as a production coordinator. And then when I was a production coordinator going through to production management, I had a similar question of where I wanted to end up within games. So what I found was really helpful was I would start doing sort of one-on-ones, or I think some places will call them skip levels, with people just in various avenues of production. I started talking to executive producers, production directors, people that are lead producers, senior producers, people that are senior production managers, just to get a sense of what their role entails. And even though I wasn't working with them day to day, I could sort of glean from what they were telling me things that I would like about the role and things that I might not be interested in with the role if I were to be in that position. And so a lot of it was just, getting a sense of how they operate, how they work with their teams, and then thinking oh, is that something that resonates with me? Is that something that I find excitement in? And then from there, even in my role now, I'm just okay, where do I want to go with my career? What sounds the most interesting to me? What do I think I have a skill set in? If there's a skill gap, how can I learn so I can go to that next level that I want to be at?
And
I think. Oh, go ahead.
I've also seen examples of UX producers actually becoming UX designers later on because they live in this world for so long. They're like, this is actually pretty neat. I want to do that. And then, depending on your ability, you might just branch out into another profession altogether.
Yeah, for sure. I think game design has definitely been really interesting to look at because one of the projects that I'm working on is a client that has not designed a game. So I've been kind of like part game designer, part like UI, UX, and I didn't have any experience in the industry before. But something that I guess I know for certain is like when you're a cook, you're cooking in the kitchen every single day, right? But like as you like level up through and become an executive chef, well, you're doing more budgets and stuff like that. And I know like production, we do budgets and keep track of that, but like I don't know, like I know production is different every studio, but I don't know how, like, I guess the difference between like an executive producer, obviously they'd probably do like a little bit less day to day in the projects, but like, I guess what do y'all do all day?
It's funny, it's hard, sort of that thing at the beginning about trying to define what a producer is I think it's going to be different wherever you go. I think you totally acknowledge that. My typical day-to-day can range from, for me, there are times I am in shot grid editing tasks because one of my directs is busy doing something else. And so I do that just because it's a gap that needs filling. But a lot of my focus is on health of the team, management, leadership. I do think about budgets a lot, especially this time of year. So I wouldn't say that, it's more about capacity. Like you have the capability to drop down into something if you need to and have an impact. But, if you think about your effort to impact ratio, it's as you move through and gain seniority in production, like you start to be there, your area of influence and impact, you use different artifacts to generate that. It helps. Also, I love that you came from sort of an atypical background. I know, speaking for myself, I used to be a classical ballet dancer, so that's my background.
That's
and
amazing.
I somehow ended up in game dev. So I love those stories, and Vanessa mentioned transferable skills, so you've clearly done that. Keep doing it. I think that'll help you.
Thanks.
Great panel, Mike. Thanks for putting it all together. So I'm a lead producer at an XGS studio, and just a little history lesson. 15 years ago, Rod Ferguson used to put together a panel of producers. And my young self coming out of MBA school, and I went up there and asked a question every time for 3 years in a row, and it drove me insane with Rod. I asked him, hey, what's the playbill? How do I become a good producer? Do I need PMP? Do I need CSM? Do I need all these things? And he gave me a one-line answer, was get it done. And it drove me insane. And then my team, I made a bet, and I would shave my head on teams if they passed cert on the first try. Sure enough, they did it. They put the whole all hands together, and I had my wife shave my head, during COVID. So I tweeted that out. So there are some young producers here, potential. So what is the one line or the one word, if you want to become a good producer, taking Rod's spirit, what you're going to get one line, and maybe it resonates. Who knows what happens in 15 years?
So Rod is like the king of one-liners, I think, in this regard, because I have one that he gave me, which was get comfortable with ambiguity.
Yes,
I did. That's what I would say. One, get comfortable with ambiguity.
I would say be kind to each other, but keep your eye on the ball.
That's good.
We're really putting each other on the spot here. I think it's going to go back to something that Erica said, is that it's to advocate for yourself. In any place that you're in, within any portion of your career, just always remember to advocate for yourself.
And I'm going to throw it back to something Vanessa said, which is, I don't know, but I will find out.
I'm going to go with something Mr. Rogers said. Be a helper. Be a helper. Yeah. And also, I miss Rod. Rod's so great.
Thank you, everybody.